Welcome back to the Young Entrepreneurs Bible. Sorry we've been gone. We just graduated from college, so we took a little hiatus, but we're back with episode number 9, and today we have a very special guest, somebody I've had the honor of working with in the past, Mr. Brandon Metcalf. Brandon, thank you for coming on.
It's great to have you. Yeah, I'm excited to help.
Yeah. So tell us a little bit about yourself. Obviously I know you. Ed doesn't know you quite as much yet, but let everybody know who you are.
Yeah, what to tell you. So I'm a repeat entrepreneur. I have 3 companies right now. I grew up in Cleveland and then moved to Florida. Went to school in Florida. Started working for a bank in Florida when I was in school. So I started off as a teller and then a banker, and then I convinced them to give me my first banking center when I was 21. So I was managing bank and figuring that out, and then ended up moving to Chicago for that bank and opening a bunch of banking centers and all of that, and then stumbled into staffing and recruiting. Did that for a while, and then got really frustrated with all the software that was available. So I was like, I think I can build a better software with no software experience. Decided to do it and started that in 2009. That turned into my first company called Talent Rover, which we ended up scaling that to a pretty big global company. So I think we're in 8 countries and customers in 40 countries. Ended up selling that in March of 2018, and then got the idea to create one of my companies now, Place, which was how we met. And then I also created a company as well at the same time called Blueprint Advisory. And then recently, at the end of last year, we created Assemble, and we've been busy with that. So been in Austin since October of 18. Love it here. So happy to be on campus with you guys and chatting the chat.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Wow.
You have any questions?
Well, that's a lot to unpack.
Yeah, I was going to leave now.
Yeah, the repeat. I guess of all the businesses you've started, which one do you think has been the easiest to start, and which has been the most difficult to date?
None of them are easy, right? So,
yeah.
I think taking the risk and doing the first one's always the most exciting. It's always the one that you know the least about. I look at Talent Rover and the experience that I gained there, and it's phenomenal because, one, I'd never built a software company. I'd never built software before. So I came up with the V1 of what the product would do, and then I hired developers to do the really crazy, complicated stuff. But we went to market with it, and then I think it was about a year and a half into that we had the opportunity to expand into London, which I'd never had any international experience. So decided to do that and take the risk, and then that led to us expanding into India and then Dublin, and then we started to just continue to go from there. So Talent Rover was like a crash course on really how to run software, what is software, how does the business work. It was also how do you run a business in multiple countries. So that whole part with not having any experience with raising money, like that business we ended up raising $28 million for, how to manage investors, like that whole learning curve was crazy. But the whole business was 6.5 years, right? From start to finish from the time we sold. So it was pretty quick. I think the normal startup is about 10 years before you sell. Mm-hmm. And then, taking that experience and then creating Place was somewhat easier and somewhat way more difficult. So like Talent Rover, since I came out of staffing and recruiting, that was a product built for staffing and recruiting. So I completely got the space. Place, I wanted to solve a lot of the stuff that we experienced when we were building Talent Rover, where the initial concept for Place was we were going to do financial forecasting for B2B Saas companies, which we obviously knew a lot about, but we really didn't understand the SaaS ecosystem the way that we understood the staffing ecosystem. Mm-hmm. One, we didn't understand how much bigger it was and how a bigger ecosystem actually made it much more difficult to be successful in. So Place has always been, what are we offering? Do we have product market fit? And I think, the business has been around for 4.5 years now. Last year is really the first year that we think we figured out product market fit. So that was hard. And Blueprint's different. Blueprint, my consulting firm, is the little engine that can. And I say that because it was never really been a big focus. Like the whole reason why Blueprint even got created is when I started Place, I had a bunch of people just coming to me saying, hey, can you give us some consulting advice now that you're a free agent, if you will? And when you're launching a software company, you need all the money you can. So started doing that. That turned into a $500,000 business right out of the gate. So I was like, well, there's a there. So I recruited a guy that used to work with me at Talent Rover to run it. And then he turned it into a multi-million-dollar profitable business. And, it's since expanded out of just my little consulting bubble to really being the distribution engine for Place, but also doing a lot of other things outside of Place, which is really what's grown it. And then Assemble came from all the work at Blueprint, so it spun out of it. Assemble so far has been the easiest business in one respect, because it pretty much competes with Talent Rover. So I know that space inside and out. I know how to be successful in the space. I know what I'm doing. I know who to talk to and all of that. But it's a whole different way of doing it. So, I think Talent Rover and Place are probably the two hardest for different reasons. But every business is hard.
So one thing that you just mentioned that I wanted to touch on real quick is you said you built V1 of Talent Rover. How did you do that?
I figured it out.
Did you do like all front end or?
So all of my companies have been built on Salesforce, right?
Okay.
So Salesforce is like my nucleus, and I've been in the Salesforce ecosystem since 2004. So how I figured out how to build in Salesforce was Google. I would just Google, how do I do this? How do I do that? And it would teach me, and then I would play around with it, screw it up, and just continue, and then I figured it out. And then there was some true stuff that required complex code writing, which I couldn't do, and that's when I hired the developers to do. It was really 6 components of the product. But by the time I hired them, I already had a whole framework for exactly what I wanted, so it was easy to go very specific with what they were needed to do. And they had their stuff developed in 6-7 months.
Wow. How long did it take you to build that V1?
Probably a year and a half. But I also knew exactly what I wanted. So I knew Salesforce at least enough to be dangerous, and I knew what I didn't like about all the other softwares we've ever had to use. So I had a concept of what I wanted it to be, which gave me the framework and the roadmap to execute on.
What were those existing softwares that you were kind of building against?
A lot of them still out there, and they're old and outdated, which is why we're doing Assemble, because it's like no one's done anything since we sold Talent over 5 years ago. And I'm like, this is low-hanging fruit. So like Bullhorn, which is the company that bought us, they're probably the most innovative of all the players out there. They're also the largest player in the space. There were companies like Job Science, which was another Salesforce-based staffing and recruiting software. I forget all the others. Aviante, TempWorks. I mean, there was a lot of them. Bullhorn bought most, so all of it rolled into Bullhorn. Like Talent Rover is now the Bullhorn for Salesforce product. But staffing's been around for a while, and technology for it's been around for a while. It's also an interesting industry, which is part of the difference between staffing and SaaS, where if you look at the innovation that goes into staffing software specific companies, you're talking about a low spend. I would say with everyone combined, you're definitely less than $1 billion of investment going into software development. It's probably even closer to $500,000. Whereas if you look at like Salesforce spends $4.6 billion a year on innovation. And it's just like a completely different mindset, right? So that's why getting back into staffing and comparing it to what we're doing for SaaS is a whole different world.
Yeah, and I always thought it was really interesting. Like you've essentially built your own empire off of
working on it.
Salesforce. And I guess for me, that was never something I ever necessarily thought about. When you think about it, it's genius in a way, because you have an existing infrastructure and you can just like utilize it as a springboard. But just for like those of you who kind of don't or might not necessarily understand this, Salesforce is one of the, if not probably the most powerful software in business right now. And like your phone, it has an app exchange. So all of your companies, all of the companies that Brandon has built are apps that businesses can go and basically buy and kind of utilize or integrate into their Salesforce instance already.
Yeah, or they could just so Talent Rover, we turned Salesforce into a platform as a service back before platforms as a services were really a thing, where we could take their core product and their core infrastructure and reinvent it to become something else that we wanted it to be. So Salesforce started off as a CRM, right? So Benioff came out of Oracle and wanted to do it in a different way, which was his big vision of like, he thought it was dumb that you had to install software via CDs into a computer. And he's like, why can't we just do this on the internet before that was called the cloud? So he's really invented the cloud. And then he was really smart when he was setting it all up, going, where could this go? How do we extend this to other types of businesses and other business processes? So early on in Salesforce's life, like I think they were formed in 1999. So, I think in 2022 2002 or 2001 or 2002 is when he started this whole partner approach of opening up the platform so partners could build products on it. Mm-hmm. So in 2009, when I was conceptualizing what Talent Rover was, which is only 10 years into Salesforce's existence, right? So it's still pretty early. Everyone thought I was nuts. Like, you're going to build something on someone else's platform. How is this going to work? Why would they just not compete with you and do all the stuff? And, it has since then been proven the value that you get from building on someone else's platform is tremendous, because a lot of the heavy technical lift for us was already taken care of. So our speed to market was very fast. Like, I didn't have to build the infrastructure. The infrastructure was there. The trick to being able to build a successful company on Salesforce, or now you could do it on Microsoft, or you can do it on Google, is to really know why you're building it and what business process you're going to solve, and then understand the ecosystem well enough to understand which ecosystem you should be building in and why, and is that going to help you achieve what you're going to achieve. So like Salesforce for us made perfect sense because we liked the innovation, we liked where it was going. But if you think about the nature of a staffing and recruiting firm, like, everyone's pretty much selling. So you're selling to find companies that will let you work on their jobs. You're selling to convince candidates to take the jobs with the clients you just found. Mm-hmm. So looking at a CRM and going, okay, well, you manage accounts, you manage contacts, you manage all my phone calls and my emails and my activities and all that, and you allow me to report off of it, that becomes interesting because recruiting's very similar to sales. So that's where a lot of the thoughts came from, is, well, what if we just extend the rest of the process?
I want to kind of, for the audience, a lot of our audience are younger, recent college grads or even in college who are trying to find out. One of the biggest things is like that entrepreneurial fear of like taking that leap for your first one. I think you touched on that. Can you talk about had you left your full-time job while you were drawing up the V1, or at what point were you like, it's time to really get into it head first? What was that transition like for you, going from like banking over to like full-blown entrepreneurship?
Yeah, I mean, and that risk never goes away. You have that risk. Like, I've founded 4 companies now, and it's always the same risk of like, do I really want to do this? This is like a huge time commitment, but it's also a huge financial risk, and also reputation risk and all of that. So I went from banking, and then I was working in staffing and recruiting. So like for me, I was already in the industry, and then my last job in staffing was leading technology for the company that I was at. And, I was tasked with finding a better software for us because we were just completely over everything that was available. And this was like $40 million firm, so not big, but decent size. Before that, I was with Kelly Services, which is like a $2 or $3 billion staffing firm. So I got to see how these massive staffing firms used. And like back then, and this wasn't that long ago. I mean, I guess it was a long time ago now, but this was like in the, early 2000s. So I was with Kelly.
We were born.
Yeah, and now I feel really old. Thanks. But this was like in the early 2000s, and like one of the screens that we had at Kelly was a full-blown green screen. I'm like, this is like crazy, because even for me in my old age now that I feel, the green screen was like 20 years before that. I'm like, what are we doing? So then CV Partners, that was the firm that I was at. Like, I just couldn't find technology, and I'd spent so much time trying to customize the tech that we had, trying to find other tech, that I'm like, I just have a better idea. And it was the confidence that I have a better idea that really like motivated me. And then it was also the risk of the CEO at that firm when I went to him and said, I want to build our own software. He's like, you're nuts. I'm like, yeah, but I want to build our own software. And then I put a business plan together and ROI and showed him like the path forward. And he had the confidence to take the risk. So we started building it to use internally. And then about 6 months into it, I had a crazier idea. I'm like, we need to commercialize this. And he's like, okay, now this is really like scary, and like, how are we going to do this? None of us have ever run a software company. We were in a contract with another vendor that said we couldn't build our own software, much less build a competitive software. And we're like, this is so different from theirs. Let's do it. So we even took the risk, knowing that we were probably going to get sued. We did get sued, but we still did it. And then it was like, that was the easy part looking back on it, because that was just like, okay, getting into it. We didn't know what we were really about to go through with trying to figure out how to build a software company, much less a global software company. But I think once you take the risk, taking the next risk gets easier, and you get more confident. But you've got to surround yourself with people that support you and can back you, because being an entrepreneur is probably the loneliest thing you can do. And especially when you start to become a successful entrepreneur, it gets lonelier, and it's really hard.
So whenever you did take the leap to do Talent Rover, how did you fund it?
So we were funding it out of the company that we were building it for.
Got it.
First. And then we went to market, and then we had to start raising funds from investors. And then luckily, my business partner was well connected with a lot of people that could be angel investors. So Talent Rover, we raised $28 million for it, and about $25 million came from super angel investors.
Jeez, 28 mil.
And then $3 million came from the Adecco group right before we sold the company.
Cool. I mean, you said you kind of went into that not knowing, or you knew the space, but you didn't know everything that came with building a software company.
I knew nothing about building a software company.
Did you have like a mentor that helped you get through that, or was it just like a trial by fire, figure it out as we go? Because I think we've had people on here, and some of them say like it's a mentor accelerates that process heavily, and kind of like, it's smart. It's good to, experience is the best teacher, but if you can learn from someone else's experiences and they can endow that on you, you can kind of skip the stumbling, you can get further faster. But then other people really value, like, since I started from the bottom, I kind of learned, they argue that you learn better going from, trial by fire with yourself. What's your take on?
I mean, if I can get somewhere faster, I'm going to use whatever avenue I have to get somewhere faster. I didn't have a mentor on the technology side. I did have mentors on the business side. As much as they weren't even in software, they were savvy business leaders. And then I found other people that could be business advisors in software that helped me. But on the technical side, I didn't have that. Probably would have helped me. But one of the other things that you learn is you want input and you want advice, even for mentors and all that. Doesn't mean you listen to it. It's input, it's advice. What makes you successful is being able to take a lot of different data points, process them, and figure out what's right for you. And some of that is like making mistakes, not taking someone's advice and then going, well, shit, I should have took that advice. But you don't know until you know. And then being able to take risks and make decisions and get most of them right. And that's a trick to be successful. Like, I've made millions of decisions throughout my career. I usually get most of them right, but not always. And the ones that you get wrong, you're making sure that you can recover from, and what's your pivot and what's your next step to keep going.
What's your decision-making process look like, or do you even have one? Is it just on a whim?
So it's funny because it's gotten more buttoned down in some respects as I've gotten older. Like, I learned a lot from Kent, who is the CEO of that staffing firm that I came out of, who's still a business partner. He's on the board of Place, and he's still a really good friend. And he taught me ready, shoot, aim. So that's not the most chronological order when you're thinking about shooting a gun, right? You should be ready, aim, shoot, not ready, shoot, aim.
Yeah.
So you've got to go a lot of times off of gut and what the data you have. Sometimes it's better to make a decision off of limited data to not make a decision and wait. With that said, the more data you have that you can analyze through the right lens, the better decision you're going to make. So it's a juggling act where impatience and indecision is worse than no decision. But you've got to get good at making the right decisions. So for me, it's a matter of trying to process what I can. I've got a lot of different experience in a lot of different facets now, so I can lean on what I've seen in the past. I try not to be emotional is kind of probably the biggest piece of advice. Like, if you're making a decision based off of an emotional reaction, it's probably going to be one of your worst decisions. Right. So finding a way to step back, calm down, go for a walk, do whatever you need to do, and then make the decision is usually much more helpful.
So I want to dial back a little bit. You started out in banking. They put a lot of trust in you to be 21 and managing your own branch. Why did you leave that? I mean, it seems like you had a pretty solid trajectory. Why'd you go into staffing?
Yeah, bored. Like, this is the other thing with me is, like, I've calmed down a lot as I've gotten older, but, I was 21 managing a bank in Orlando, and then they gave me the opportunity. Actually, I had two different opportunities. I had an opportunity where I could move to New York and go into private banking, which sounded super exciting, but unfortunately the private bank was in the World Trade Center, so that could have been bad. Or I could go to Chicago and open banks. So I moved to Chicago, was at the very first banking center for Bank of America in Chicago, liked it, and then I was going to go to the next bank and the next bank and the next bank and continue opening them. I just kind of looked around and I was like, is this really what I want to be doing? Like, what else am I going to get from this? And sure, I can climb the corporate ladder, but people are there 25, 30 years. and still in kind of middle management type roles at such a big organization where it's like, this just isn't exciting. So I wanted to try something else. Like early in my life and my career, I got advice of I needed to find a field and specialize in it. Mm-hmm. And I always thought that was crap. I'm like, why? Like, I know where I want to go. I either want to be a CEO or run companies. No CEO has only done one thing their whole career. Mm-hmm. I wanted a broader experience, and I also wanted to try different industries. So I literally stumbled into a job posting for a sales manager for Kelly Services, applied, got the job, and they moved me from Chicago to Denver. And then that set off like, okay, let me figure out staffing and recruiting. I was with Kelly for 2.5 years. They moved me from Denver to Sacramento to San Francisco. And then when I was in San Francisco, which is also something else, like I've gotten to where I'm at because people invest in me, but I also take a risk. So take a risk of not just changing industries, but take a risk of just completely moving my life. Yeah. And if you look at going from Orlando to Chicago with the bank, leaving the bank and going to Denver with Kelly, and then Kelly gave me the opportunity after about 9 months to go like really fix the Sacramento market. Did did really well there. And then they're like, do you want to go to San Francisco to do Northern California? I'm like, sure. So just continuing to move. And I was only in Sacramento for like 6 months, but I didn't really like Sacramento. So that was good. And I loved San Francisco. And then I was in San Francisco for, I don't know, maybe a year. And then I got a random call from Kent saying, I want to have lunch with you. I'm like, who the hell are you? I've never heard your name. I don't know who you are. Went to lunch with him. He offered me a job, and I found out that my regional office that I was in, his sister-in-law was managing the office clerical team there, so she backdoored me to him. Took a chance with him and did that, and then like the story with him was I was with CV Partners for, I don't know, maybe 2 years, and I got a random phone call from Google saying, hey, we want to interview you. And Google calls, you go to see what Google wants to talk to you about. Yeah. So I went and it had to be at least 20-something interviews. Got the job. Was making well over twice as what I was making at CV Partners. But I just wasn't like super excited or motivated by it. I was like, that's a big number, and it's Google. That would look amazing on my resume. But it was kind of like the bank. I'm like, what's it going to take to get to where I want to be, even if I go there? And started to kind of play that through my head. So I went back to Kent, and I had the conversation that all managers hate. Mm-hmm. When you walk up to them saying, hey, can we chat? That just immediately means you're quitting, which is what I did. And I was like, look, I wasn't looking, which is also something all managers hate, because why are we having this conversation? You've automatically, you've gone through a lot of interviews in order to have this conversation. So, but anyway, we talked about it, and he's like, give me a couple hours, and let's chat again. I was like, great. Comes back in a couple hours, and he's like, I can't pay you that. But you're like the most tech savvy guy I know. Why don't you take over running technology for the company? We want to expand. Like, can you do that job? I was like, that sounds really cool. So I decided to do it. He didn't pay me anywhere near what Google was going to pay me, but I did it. And then that started the process of like completely changing our infrastructure and figuring out how to like really help the company scale. Like back then we had a telephone system where we had servers in the office that, got hacked, and someone was routing international calls through our servers, and we were getting charged all. I mean, so there was just tons and tons of stuff that I'd never learned or knew before that I learned on the job. And that's eventually where I got the idea for Talent Rover. So if you would have replayed all of that back from what you probably are told to do, I did all the things that I was not supposed to do. I turned down Google, a very high paying job at a great company. I just stepped into a field that I had no experience with. I had to really trust Kent to get me to where it was. I took a chance on a startup idea that worked, but it's the best thing I ever did. It changed my whole life.
Do you think you'd consider yourself a lucky person?
I don't know if it's luck. I think luck is what? Preparation and opportunity is kind of what it is. So the word luck, it just seems like it's random to me. Yeah. I don't think anything's really random. I think we all make decisions, and do we get the decision right or not? And then the people that we trust in, because I think it always still comes down to people. Like I always have a saying, invest in those who invest in you. Mm-hmm. If you make the right bets on the right people, big things will happen. I also think the people you surround yourself with are the people is the person you become. So if you surround yourself with like high school buddies that, just want to stay in your small town and live that life, which is nothing wrong with, that's probably what you're going to be. I wanted to surround myself with really, really successful people. And you have to define what successful people means to you, and learn from them and grow from them. And then those people open up doors. And that's what Kent did for me.
Yeah, I think that's very true. I've had like a scenario in my life where I had to kind of shift the people who I was hanging around with because I don't think that they were necessarily the best for me. And it really, really makes a difference.
And that doesn't stop. I've done that throughout my whole life. I've done that here in Austin.
Yeah.
Like you just continue to do it, and there's nothing wrong with it. It's just you need to figure out what you want in life and be around people that support that.
How what tips do you have for the younger listeners for them to find those groups of people that would benefit them?
Be bold and ask. Well, like the reason why I'm here is because of Mateo. Like anything he asks me to do, I usually show up for eventually.
Thank
It
you.
usually takes a little bit of time. But be bold and ask. I think generally most people, especially most successful people, want to help other people be successful. They want to share what they've learned. And it's usually scary to have that conversation with someone because they may tell you no, and they still may tell you no. But I think always knowing that, and if you're doing it in a way where you're trying to respect their time, and you're genuine with what the ask is, and you're clear about what the ask is, you'll probably get more yeses than no.
Yeah, I had to be clear with Babs this time. I was like, I really would like to do this in person. I know you always do virtual, but I don't know. What do you think? Do you like this?
Yeah, it's cool. It's just, so for me, it's just timing, right?
Yeah,
Because
of
my
course.
whole life is scheduled. So coming in person means there's a half an hour on both sides that I've got to figure out how I'm going to get here, how we're going to shuffle other things around. But I'm here.
On that note, what does a day in the life look like for you?
Yeah, good
I was
question.
like, that's because I mean you run a lot of businesses, and we'll talk about like what your life looks like right now, and maybe you can tell us about maybe there's another time in your career where it was drastically different, and you can kind of talk about how your day changes from like a starting entrepreneur to like a seasoned one.
Yeah, I mean, Talent Rover life was a lot different from my life now. I usually wake up at 5-ish in the morning. I don't work for the first hour. I get up, I don't check my phone. I have a morning routine that I go through that gets me grounded and centered and gets me prepared for the day. Like one of the tricks that I have is, well, a couple of the tricks. Don't look at your phone first thing because it's just going to set the tone for your entire day before you even have a chance to put the framework around your entire day. I also, when I'm ready to start work, the first thing I do is I look at my calendar, and I look at every single meeting on the calendar, which is usually the whole day is blocked. And I intentionally go through each of those meetings, and I ask myself, what can go wrong in every single one of those meetings? So that I can already have a game plan for something going wrong and what I think could go wrong and what potentially would be the worst thing that could go wrong. So when that inevitably happens in one of those meetings, I'm already prepared. And that's part of the reaction piece. Like earlier in my career, I would react, and it would be usually an emotional reaction. Now with that preparation, it gives me a chance to say, okay, if that happens, what am I going to do? So I'm more prepared. So it makes life a lot easier. So, get up 5, start work around 6:30, work until 5:30 or 6. I don't like to work past 6. It's kind of like you're not getting on my calendar unless it's like a dinner or something, which I don't really love going to dinners either. I'm actually a big introvert. I like being home. I like being isolated. But with my job, I have to be out and all of that. And when I'm on. Like I can engage with people and enjoy it. But even at like conferences are beyond exhausting for me. So I always will sneak back to my hotel room and like disappear for a while. But like if you think about all the things I have going on, it seems like unrealistic that I could manage it in the time frame. I also have no meeting Mondays. So on Mondays, I won't have any internal meetings at all. It's something I've been trying for the past few months, and it's awesome because it's my day to think and to get things done. And then Tuesday through Friday are like slammed. And then I actually like working a little bit on the weekend. So I work every Saturday and Sunday for a couple hours. But it's my quiet time. It's my space. No one's bugging me. I can get caught up on things. I feel refreshed. And, outside of that, I'm always thinking about different stuff, and like work's always on. I talk a lot about, there's this misconception of work-life balance. Mm-hmm. I don't think there's such a thing. I think it's just balance. And you got to figure out what that is and what's more important to you. And, there's nothing saying your family life is more important than work. That's completely fine. Or your work life is more important than your family life. Like when I started Talent Rover, I was just in a new relationship with Mark. We'd been dating for a month, 2 months. And Talent Rover got going, and about a year in, Mark and I were pretty serious, and I had to tell him, I'm like, you have to be number 2. because number one is the company.
And you foot down.
Well, it was just a conversation because it was like you could see where it was going, and I didn't know how to manage my time and manage my emotions and manage the stress and everything else that was going on back then because it was my first time doing it.
Yeah.
But it was the realization of like, if this is going to work, like I've got to go do this company because like it's life changing. And it took Mark a minute to say, okay, I'm in for the ride. And then, we're still together and everything's great. And it's what actually made us work. And it was foundational, but a lot of it's being intentional. A lot of it's trying not to be just completely focused on yourself, which was hard for me early in my career as well. And trying to just think about what is going on. I think you can get so consumed in the day to day that you lose sight of like what the bigger picture is. So like with the Talent Rover days, 14, 16-hour days every single day. Like I didn't see my friends for 6-7 months. Remember, as the time I was in New York, finally on a mini little break from work, and it was around Thanksgiving, and we were out to dinner at a restaurant, and I got a call from Kent saying stuff's not working, and I had to stop my whole vacation and like go fix it. Or we would travel a lot and do vacations, and when we would go on vacation, I would work half the vacation. I don't do that now. When I go on vacation now, I'm on vacation. And I think that's really healthy, but it took me a long time to figure that stuff out.
I was going to ask you about your vacations because I feel like as an entrepreneur, especially like when you're starting off and it's more of like dependent on you rather than like a whole team or whatever, I feel like it's kind of hard to just go full dark. Like I'm going on vacation. I'm not going to look at my email, answer anything. And it's interesting. Another question I had was your businesses are global. How does like the time differences affect it? Like, do you ever hop on meetings like at 8 p.m. for like people like on the other side of the world, or how has that presented challenges to you?
So, I mean, the vacation thing, like back in the Talent Rover days, like we would go on a week vacation and it would take me 3 days of that vacation to stop working and try to unwind from work. And then I'd have like a day, maybe 2 days of relax, and then I would automatically start ramping. That was never a vacation. And I almost burnt out many, many different times because I was just not recharging. So now when I go on vacation, I'm on vacation. And it's like, if something really hits the fan, yes, call me. But otherwise, you're on your own. Figure this out. You're going to sink or swim. And these days it's like, what's going to hit the fan? Like, are we going to miss payroll? Like, we need to know. But I know that before I go on vacation. So it's really starting to think through what could go wrong when I'm out to make sure that there's plans in place that mitigate that so that I can relax. Another big piece of my personality is I'm a planner. If I have a plan, I don't get anxiety. If I don't have a plan, I get anxiety. So the more I can think through, like, what am I going to do? How am I going to do it? All of that, like in contingency plans, like what happens if this person quits? What am I going to do? Or what happens if this like the more you can think about that, the easier mindset gets. The international piece is funny because, I was in San Francisco building Talent Rover, and we had a development center in Hyderabad, India. That is literally the opposite side of the world, basically. Yeah. There would be times where I would take the calls, early morning, late at night. What I've learned and how I structure the companies now is one person in the U.S. can't be dealing with all of that. So usually we'll have a team that will do early morning calls, or you may have some people in the U.S. that like to do late calls, and the team in India then adjusts to that. And then, the team in India also adjusts, like when do they start their day and when do they end their day. And typically the culture over there, because they work with so many Western companies, is they automatically just start later. So usually their day starts at like 10:30 in the morning, and they work later from it. These days I don't take the calls because the team does. Slack is our primary form of communication anyway. Of course, if anything's up, like I'm always available.
So I know we were talking about travel. What are like some of your favorite destinations that you've gone to?
I mean, I literally have been around the world. That was one of the blessings with Talent Rover, where we weren't nervous to open up in different countries. So like that company we were in, we had 2 offices in San Francisco. We had an office in Chicago. We had an office in Dublin, Ireland, London, Hyderabad, Hong Kong, Tokyo, and Sydney, Australia. So literally around the world. And I would spend 2 weeks a month flying around the world and just seeing all the offices. And then, when we were winning the Adecco group, which was a big thing for us because it was the largest staffing firm in the world, Kent and I, when we were launching Talent Rover, we made a joke. They're like, one day we'll be on a yacht because we sold licenses to Adecco. When I sold licenses to Adecco, and I still wasn't on a yacht, but it led to selling the company, which eventually had me be on someone else's yacht.
Nice.
So that was good. But Adecco had us in I think 40-ish countries. So, and I was flying all around the world to see them. So if you ever get the chance to do international, especially from a work standpoint, it will change your perspective on how life and business works. It's the best thing that ever happened to me in my career. But as far as where do I like to go, I mean, Italy is one of our favorite places. We just booked another trip for Italy for next year. Greece is a very, very close second to Italy. London's actually my favorite city in the world. I'm excited because we're starting to put boots on the ground with Assemble awesome. In London, which will be fun. Ireland's super cool on the days that it's not raining. It's usually dark and gray for most, but if you ever get there and it's sunny, it's just magical. I'm not a huge fan of Asia. Mark loves Asia. He would rather go to Asia than Europe. I'd rather be in Europe than Asia. But Italy is probably the number one. We like to go to Umbria, which is the state right next to Tuscany, which is basically just as wonderful and beautiful as Tuscany with a third of the tourists, which is awesome. We go to Mexico a lot as well, so nice. Mexico's cool.
Yeah, I just did my passport application a couple weeks ago, so I'm finally getting my passport. And
we're gonna go to Mexico.
Yeah, I want to go to Mexico City first.
Mexico City's cool. It almost killed me the last time I was there, but it's cool.
How?
So we forgot we were in Mexico City. So Mexico City is an awesome, awesome city.
Yeah.
It's higher elevation.
Big too,
It's big. It's higher elevation, so you can get drunk a little easier. So be careful with that. But it feels like a European city, versus Puerto Vallarta, or we got married in Sayulita, which is right it's north of Puerto Vallarta. We've spent a lot of time in Cabo. All of those places to me feel like tourist attractions and beach vacations, which is fine. I love going there. Mexico City felt like I was in Europe. So we forgot we were in Mexico. So we're just eating everything. I ended up getting food poisoning on the very last night. So bad that we had to go to the ER. And I was in the ER for 6 hours. And they wanted to admit me. So I was like, there's no way. We're going home today. So I had to sign all these releases. We get to the airport, I faint, and I'm like, just get me on the damn plane. Get me on the plane, come home, get on all this stuff, and then it was just really, really bad food poisoning. So food's amazing. Be careful what you eat.
All right, yeah.
Do you speak any Spanish?
No,
I
don't speak any languages. It's one thing I wish I have the time to do because I would love to learn. When I was in high school and all that, I did 4 years of French, which is just wasted my time basically because I don't remember any of it. But if I had to learn a language, Spanish would be the language to learn.
Or it's Italian.
So you've also lived all over the U.S. Are there any cities that you recommend for younger people starting their career, or just cities that you really like? I haven't lived in a lot of those places, but I went to Chicago when I was in middle school. I got to have a hot dog there, and that was pretty formative. I just went to San Diego.
San Diego's awesome.
Or sorry, not San Diego. San Francisco. San Francisco was cool. I went to the Haight-Ashbury where the Grateful Dead are from, all the hippies. But what was your favorite city?
I mean, San Francisco was my favorite city that I personally lived in outside of Austin. I love Austin now. I wouldn't live in San Francisco right now because I think it's a bit of a shithole. It's just not managed well. It's just out of control.
Yeah.
It's sad because it is the most beautiful city in the United States. And they need to fix it, and they need to get it back to where it was. Of the places I've lived, I mean, that's where I kind of grew up. So I moved there when I was in my mid to late 20s. And I lived there for almost 11, 12 years. So that's where I discovered who I was as a person and what I liked and all of that. So it has a special place for me. Austin's cool because I think it's diverse, it's growing, there's a lot going on. I've only been here 5 years, and the whole city has completely changed. I think there's close to 1 million people here now. So there's a lot of excitement. There's a lot of buzz, especially in tech. I think the big thing, though, when I was growing my career, you had to be in the office, and the big cities where a lot of the big things happened. But now that COVID happened, and it's remote or hybrid, and so many people have moved everywhere, you don't have to be in one of the major cities in order to advance your career and do all of that. So it's really a matter of finding where the opportunity is, which is ultimately what took me everywhere I went. Like, I didn't choose to move to Chicago or Denver or Sacramento or San Francisco. It's where the opportunity was that I wanted to explore. And, I was actually in San Francisco when I launched Talent Rover. There was a time where I had to decide where we were going to move Talent Rover's headquarters because we were trying to scale, and the talent there was just crazy expensive and too difficult to get. So I wanted to move to London because it's ultimately, I think, my favorite city in the world. And Mark said no, so he chose Chicago. So we moved the headquarters from San Francisco to Chicago, and he hated Chicago. So we were in Chicago for like another 2 years when we sold. And as soon as we sold, he's like, "Can we move?" I'm like, "Where do you want to go?" We were going to move back to San Francisco. And we're looking at houses and all this stuff, and like, it was nuts. I mean, price per square foot in a house in San Francisco at the time was $2,000 a square foot.
2,000, damn.
So 1,000 square foot house is $2 million. Like, and that got kiboshed.
That's not even a house.
Like, it's tiny, right? Yeah. So we said no, and then he's like, "Why don't we move to Austin?" And I'm like, "I don't know if I can live in Texas," because I'd never really been down here, explored. I've been to Austin for like work meetings and stuff, but never really got to experience it. So 2 of our friends in Chicago had moved to Austin, and they were having a barbecue like around that time, and we came down to see them. And so we landed on Friday. On Saturday, I was like, "We're moving to Austin," and then we've been here ever since. It's been awesome.
So what was it that like made you want to move here?
Just
what did you
vibe,
see?
The vibe, the people, the laid backness, but yet there was something about it that you could tell it was going to go somewhere.
Yeah.
There's a lot of really smart people here. The food's good. The drinks are good. I mean, it's a good town to be in. And unlike like a San Francisco where, everything's on top of each other and you just get to a certain way of life, this is more of like a balance between a big city and a smaller regional place where you can still have space, you can still expand, you can still drive to things and not necessarily be on top of each other, but yet there's enough to do that it's engaging and entertaining.
Yeah, I completely agree. I think that was like what I loved so much about coming here was, and I mean, being from Texas, being like from Houston, the openness like that the city had, I just felt accepted. There was a bunch of people here who could be themselves. Yeah. And not that I couldn't be myself in Houston, but I think for us, Austin has been very much what like you described San Francisco as. Like, yes, I mean, I grew up in Houston, whatever, I had all those experiences, but here I was on my own for the first time, and I really got to kind of like discover who am I and what is it that I like, what am I all about. And yeah, I mean, I'm glad I did it. I'm glad I came out here. I don't know.
Yeah, I'm from El Paso. Have you been?
Never been.
It's one of the few cities probably. It's a very Hispanic, I mean, not even just Hispanic or Latino. It's all Mexican, basically. That's a cool thing about here. There's like Venezuela, Colombia, and like representation of all that. But over there, it's all Mexico. My parents are both Mexican, so moving here was kind of like El Paso's a big city. I think it's like 800,000 people, but it feels like a small town. So moving over here was kind of like my big city experience to date. Only 2 cities I've ever lived in. I've kind of got into real estate, and I feel like that's a game I kind of have to like put my roots somewhere. Yeah. You can't really be like mobile like that. So, and I mean, I love the city. That's why I decided to do that and stay here. But I don't know if I were to move, if I wasn't doing real estate and I was doing a job where I was moving around like that, I feel like that would be that's a unique experience that I feel offers different perspectives. I've traveled quite a bit. Had the blessing growing up, so I've been all over Mexico, but I mean, the way of life is different, but not crazy. Like, I've been to Europe. Italy's my mom's favorite destination. She wants to buy a villa someday.
We all want to buy a villa.
Yeah. But I mean, yeah, like I feel like people, there's such a different outlook on life in different parts of the world. I just got back from Asia. I feel like a lot of those older cultures don't prioritize like the work and the chasing the bag as much, and they
just depends on, I mean, because then in like Japan, like you work yourself to death, and they had to actually put laws in place to prevent that from happening. So, but it's really, I mean, just exploring and figuring out what you want. It's the same thing with your career. Like, one of the things I was blessed with was being able to do a lot of different things to figure out what I actually wanted to do, and land on that, and then be able to do it. So if you don't take the risk of any kind, like traveling, or just trying different things, like you're never really going to figure yourself out.
Yeah.
So one thing I wanted to talk about or ask you about, I think something that's really interesting about your career and I learned while working with you, you're a part of a couple of different like professional organizations. Could you kind of talk a little bit about those, groups that you're in and what you've learned from them?
Yeah, I mean, peer groups are awesome. So, I'm part of the Entrepreneurs Organization here in Austin. I literally just wrapped up my 2-year board role yesterday, so I get a bit of a break from all that.
Congrats.
It was good, but time for a little bit of a break. But EO, I'm still an active member of and will be. And, one of the things about EO that attracted to me is we have this forum experience where I'm with a group of, 5 or 6 other CEOs where we meet once a month. We meet for a meeting for 4 hours and then we go to dinner. And we do this every single month. And you have to commit that you're always going to be there. If you're not there, like there's stiff penalties that we like make you pay us as a way to keep everyone there. But, the consistency with that means that these guys understand the deepest parts of my life, because we have this thing where you give the top 5%. So we share the real top 5% of what's going on in our businesses, what's going on with our work or with our family, and then with our personal life. So these guys know me as well as anyone on the planet knows me. So when anything goes wrong, they're there, and anything goes well, they can help you. And then like when a good example of like Assemble. So when this whole possibility of launching Assemble was coming to fruition, I didn't know if I wanted to do it. Because Place was already consuming all my time. Blueprint was doing its thing. And like, do I really want a third company? And they were like, you're dumb if you don't go do this, because they could just see like why it was a fit and all of that. And, Assemble's doing phenomenally well out of the gate. So I'm really glad I did it. But it's that group, like I was saying earlier, being an entrepreneur or exec, a CEO is extremely lonely, because who do you talk to stuff about? Like, I can't talk freely to my team about everything that's going on, because it might set the wrong impression or spook them or what have you.
Yeah.
I can't necessarily talk to all my friends about what I'm experiencing without coming across sometimes like a douchebag or arrogant or whatever, where it's not really that. It's just the context of what's going on in my life. So this gives you the opportunity to be around people who get why you're talking about the things that you're talking about and the impact and the real stress and the pressure and the success that comes from it. So finding a peer group that gets you and get what you're doing is so critically important. So that's why I'm in EO. And then I'm also in Pavilion, which is more of like a go-to-marketing like group of people. So salespeople, marketing people. I'm in their CEO group, so I get to be around other mostly tech companies, but there's other non-tech companies in it as well. There's also a different type of peer group where this is a group where we don't meet in person and do all of that, but they're still there and connect you with other business opportunities. You can share different ideas. And like a good example of Pavilion was when the Silicon Valley Bank thing happened. Mm-hmm. It was like a torpedo to tech. Like everything stopped because it was terrifying. Like we didn't have any money there, but so many of our customers did, and so many venture capital firms did. And if everyone lost their money, like it would have blown up the whole tech scene, because no one's funding, and your customers are going out of business or you're going out of business. So Pavilion had all these communication channels where we could all talk freely, and none of it gets shared. It's all confidential, where you can, this is what's going on with me. What advice do you have? How do I navigate this or whatever? And really just help each other. So finding those peer groups at various different stages in your life is just so important.
Yeah, no, that's definitely very important, and I'm glad like we're kind of our own peer group.
Yeah,
but we need to find something a little more solid. Not that we're not solid, but you know what I mean. We need to kind of branch out and like expand our networks too. And I think
we're just starting. I think there's like an aspect of naturally, I guess like in the network building, I feel like there's like forced kind of where like you hit people up to go get coffee and you're proactive about it. But I feel like there's also an element of, if you just like know what to look for, opportunities to meet people present themselves, and just like, like talking to someone in an elevator. I've been at Starbucks hearing someone on a meeting, and then when they end it, like talking to them. I've had other people connect me, and like just having, I feel like there's natural networks that I think those come just with us being in a career for a certain amount of time. And I think, just as recent grads, and to those listening who probably are like, damn, I have like no network. I feel like I feel like that takes time. Like you're very seasoned. You've moved to cities all
Yeah.
over the world. So like it's something that is amassed. And I think, for younger guys going into the game, you can be proactive about it, and you can also just kind of learn to identify them as they come up naturally and kind of seize them.
Yeah, even for me though, like I'm tried and true an introvert. Like people exhaust me, and I don't mean that in a bad way, but being around people is physically exhausting for me. Versus the extrovert, you get energized from that. I'm also shy. Like I've always been shy. I was a shy kid, so me walking up to someone at like a networking event is terrifying for me.
Yeah.
I'll do it if I have to, but it's not the most natural way for me to connect with people. But the relationships you build are the key to life. Like that is the trick. It's what got me. Like when I was at the bank and I started off as a teller, I asked an executive vice president, I'm like, how do I get your job? And she's like, I'll put a plan for you. And here's what you got to go do. And I went and did it. And like one of the things was, we had this incentive as a teller to get people to sign up for credit cards. And I was like, can I go out in the drive-through and stand in the drive-through and get people to take these credit card applications from me? She's like, if you want to. So I was in the drive-through hustling credit card applications, and I ended up winning a trip to Hawaii from it. But that's also what got me to the next step. And then when I got to the next step, it was the same thing. What do I need to do here? But it was the relationship that we built that she gave me a plan. And then anything she asked me to do, I would do it before I asked her for something else. And that was that level of investment that just continued going.
Yeah. I want to, we have a couple minutes left, so I want to, kind of start wrapping things up. It's your month. Happy Pride Month. One thing that, I wanted to talk about, and maybe you could tell people about, is your experiences like as a gay man in entrepreneurship. Has that ever been something that's been difficult to deal with? Has it caused you like any trouble, or could you please tell us about that?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's with like kind of any diversity, right? Like when I was younger, it's like, do I talk about it? Do I hide it? Like, I don't want like my identity to be just that. And the way that I typically come across, usually people are a bit surprised when they find out I'm gay. So I've never like had like the other connotation, but I'm also not bashful about it. Like I'm proud of who I am. I think that confidence is kind of the key. If you make it an issue in yourself and you portray it as an issue outward, you're going to feel that more from people. But for me, it is what it is. I can't control who I like or who I don't like. And so in the business context, no, I don't think it has. I think it potentially could have earlier in my career if it was the focal point that I wanted to make sure everyone knew that I was the gay guy in the office. Like, I don't think that should really be anyone's focus. Like, it doesn't matter who you are. It's a matter why you're there and how you interact with people and all of that. If you focus more on that, then I think it becomes less of a thing. But I also have like my own experience with it, and because it was never really something that people perceived on me and all of that, it was never a challenge. I don't think other people have the same experience. I think other people, it can be more challenging. And I think a lot of what we were talking about finding a group of people that support you and you feel confident and you can be yourself around, and getting them to help you to learn and like, how do you handle difficult situations? How do you manage through them? That becomes the key to it. I think for the people who can't figure that out, that's why you see all the suicide rates and all that. So leaning into people and finding a network of supporters is so important. That's why I like a lot of the companies that create programs to make people feel included and all that. And even like, example for me, like when I was in EO, my board seat was for our accelerator group, and I was so focused on diversity for that group, where to me diversity isn't like just race or sexual orientation, it's everything else. It's like we had companies as low as $250,000 in revenue and as high as $2 million in revenue in the accelerator group. That's diversity in itself, and how do you make sure all of those different people are comfortable in getting what they need from the program and all of that. And I just look at that holistically across the board. But being a gay founder or gay entrepreneur or gay whatever just hasn't really been a big challenge for me. I do think the environment we're in now is very difficult because of just everything that's happening politically, like how politically divisive the country is, which is interesting for me because like I'm a very conservative physically type person. And then I'm a little bit more liberal when it comes to like personal issues and all of that, but I'm like pretty much middle of the road.
Mm-hmm.
And everyone that I really know is kind of in that same bubble.
Of course.
And then you have the people that are on the extremes of both sides, which I don't agree with either of those sides.
Yeah.
But that's what's driving like a lot of the divisiveness and all of that. And I just hope that we can find a way to continue to move forward. I think, the next 2 years with the political election coming up is going to be difficult. But yeah.
So we've got like a minute left. I want to do flash questions. You can hop in. Favorite car?
My Ferrari.
Favorite watch?
Rolex, Daytona.
Do you have or do you want a boat?
I don't want to own a boat. We're in a boat club, and it's the best thing ever because we don't use it very often, and I think it's a waste of money, but it's nice to have.
Where do all the secret entrepreneurs in Austin hang out?
There's not a single place. I mean, they hang out with each other is the secret. And usually you won't find them like in like an event hanging out. It's like they'll be at a restaurant at someone's house or something like that.
A favorite restaurant in Austin?
That's hard. I mean, Austin has so many good ones.
Tex-Mex.
I mean, my favorite food group is tacos.
Oh yeah, too.
Oh
yeah.
So,
oh yeah.
But we go to Laurel a lot because we live right there. I love barbecue. We spend a lot of time at Vinaigrette, which is a salad place on Congress. We eat lunch a lot there. I mean, it's literally all over the place. We go to Soto. We're big sushi people. We were just at Juniper the other night. It's all over. I mean, when I first moved here, I easily gained 20 pounds just because we were constantly eating. And it's difficult, but the food scene here just continues to get better.
Yeah, I know you like Suerte, right? I went there one time. I saw you there, and I thought the tacos there were awesome.
I was just there last week.
Yeah, there's another one I was gonna recommend to you because it's similar. I'm pretty sure they're like competitors, but they also have really good food. I can't remember it right now, but
it's like you're leaving me hanging.
Yeah,
I'll let you know. But anyways, we got to wrap up. What do you want to leave the people with? How can they contact you? Is there anything you want to plug?
I mean, contact me. The easiest way to find me is LinkedIn. I mean, that's kind of my nucleus for everything else. So feel free to hit me up. I mean, for me, plugging is just pay attention to what I'm doing, and I'll keep you pretty well informed. I think for this audience, take the risk, go for it, find people that will support you. But if you don't risk something, you're just never going to accomplish anything.
All right.
Wise words.
Yeah. Thank you. That was YEB episode 9 with Brandon Metcalf.
Till next time.